So there are a lot of contenders for the most powerful person in the Cosmere. The most obvious answer is Sazed, since he has 2 shards and the most investiture of any known character. But you could argue the dragons, but we really don't know that much about them so far. Or you could say the Dawn Shard, since they were the weapons that killed Aidenalcium. Or you could argue Hoid, since he worked on collecting different forms of investiture across the Cosmere, and has several different powers. You could even argue Kelsier, since he might be the character who's built the biggest network of interplanetary individuals. But I'm here to talk about a contender that nobody mentions. Wan Shay Lu, aka Moonlight. Yes, the mortal lady with the stamps from the Emperor's Soul novella. She's from Cell, and wasn't born extra invested. So, yes, physically, she's not particularly strong. And mentally, she excels at some things, but isn't anywhere near Teravangian on a Genius Day level of intellect. But what she has chosen to specialize in can give her all that and more. Okay, so let's break down her magic really quickly. She uses something called forging. More specifically, she specializes in soul forgery. She uses stamps to allow her to change things into what they could have been. So let's say you drop your favorite metal bucket and it gets a big dent in it. Oh no! But if Shay put a stamp in it, she could go back to the point where that bucket diverged and choose for it to instead go down the route of it not being dropped and dented. Essentially, rewriting the object's history. It's a little complicated, but not too bad. She also has recently come to develop something called a universal stamp, which can be applied to multiple surfaces to create things like doors. Pretty useful and versatile, but far from the strongest thing in the Cosmere. Now, what she can also do is examine herself and discover where she diverged in life and choose a different path. It takes a lot of study, but she's made several different personas to use whenever she chooses. These stamps go far beyond just a disguise for herself. She actually becomes that person. Her body physically changes. Her knowledge completely diverges. These stamps are known as essence marks. She currently holds 6 essence marks as of the Lost Metal. Shizan, the Mark of the Warrior, which turns her into a fighter who spent the last 15 years training. The Survivalist, which helps her survive in the wilderness. The Scholar, which gives her access to a dozen different languages and a great deal of knowledge in mathematics and politics. The Beggar, which allows her to become aware of how to survive in the streets. And the Way Out, which lets her leave her life entirely to become a nobody farmer and forget about the things that she's done in the past. And finally, the newest reveal, and the most interesting, the Elantrian. While others are powerful in their own ways, this one stands out. It was only ever used once, and it required pure investiture to put in use. But it allowed her to permanently become an Elantrian, an immortal invested being. Interestingly enough, this one, unlike her other essence marks, didn't require her to reapply the stamp, seeming to be permanent unless it's purposefully removed. While in this state though, she has access to all of the powers and abilities that an Elantrian has. Now, do you see where I'm going with this? Let's say that she discovers that Wax consumed a bit of Lerasium. She could hypothetically rewrite her history with a stamp to put herself in Wax's lab with him and his pals when the experiment went through. And suddenly, just like that, she has access to all the powers of a Mistborn. And that version of her would actually probably be pretty easy to produce, since it only requires a small deviation in her personal past. Granted, it would cost her some pure investiture, but it's completely within the realm of possibility. But Hoid has access to an Elantrian powers already, and Mistborn powers, and breaths, and he's even a Knight Radiant. He's way ahead in this game already, right? Well, not really. What Hoid doesn't have is control. His exposure to his Dawn Shard left him unable to act in many ways, most notably, unable to harm another person. This is a massive cripple on him, and something that Shay doesn't need to worry about. Okay, that's already powerful. But let's take this to an entirely different level. Access to different magics doesn't put you on equal footing with beings like Odium. Except when you stop to consider that Odium has been multiple people. In fact, all of the shards used to be someone else, and people can take those powers for themselves. If there's a likely path and enough investiture on hand, Shay could theoretically ascend not only to the level of an Elantrian, but to the level of a shard. And while she might still be trapped within the confines of the shard's attribute, she would have the ability to remove her stamp, then put another one in with different shards' attributes. This could make her the most powerful being in the Cosmere by a long shot. Not in just regards to pure power, but an agency to act. Everyone else has an attribute checking their power, even the Dawn Shards. But she could bypass that entirely. Hypothetically, she could actually make it so that two shards exist in the Cosmere at the very same time. Okay, now this is all speculation, and there's a lot that could go wrong with this. Plus, Shay is likely never going to see that amount of pure investiture. But it's not impossible. For example, Scadrial had a god's amount of investiture just laying around for a millennia in the form of the Mist. If she had hypothetically found a way to access that, suddenly it becomes possible. Alas, that option no longer looks like a viable route. However, the Cosmere is a big place. And there are a lot of worlds out there with a lot of possibilities. Okay, now let's talk about the significant drawback to her power, in that she might not be able to remove her stamp. Or rather, the person that she becomes might be unwilling to remove the stamp. This is a very real risk, as transforming herself into a Elantrian caused her to run away, not removing the stamp willingly. If she assumed the power of Odium, it's possible she'd be unwilling to relinquish that power. Or if she took on the power of honor, she might feel compelled to do all she can for those around her, selflessly sacrificing her old self for what she would see as the greater good. And while the Ghostbloods have enough resources to force her into removing the stamp of an Elantrian, the stamp of a god is another story altogether. So while Shay might not currently have the ability to move mountains or destroy stars, don't count her out of the race. Her expertise has given her access to one of the most earth-shaking abilities in the Cosmere. And I expect we haven't seen the last of her. Her potential has only been scratched so far. Okay, that's my YouTube video. Those are my thoughts. Feel free to write in the comments who you think is the most powerful person in the Cosmere. I'd love to know your guys' thoughts down below. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you. Like, subscribe, please subscribe. Alright, goodbye. Bye-bye. See you.